Hi, I'm Anna Sheftel, principal of the School of Community and Public Affairs.
And I'm Hana Sharafati Zangane, a student at the school.
And
welcome to La Grande Histoire d'une Petite École.
Well, my name is András Göllner in Hungarian. I've been known here at Concordia as Andrew Göllner for most of my time. And I was, believe it or not, I began my encounter with Concordia University before it was Concordia University as an undergraduate student in 1963 at Sir George Williams University. And I was kicked out of Sir George Williams in 1964 as a young 20-year-old by the then Dean of Science, Professor Madras, who kicked me out of his office with the following expression: "Mr. Göllner, we neither have time nor money to deal with your kind. Please get out." So I was kicked out of Sir George Williams University in 1964, and within 10 years I was back with a doctorate in my pocket, a BA, a master's degree, a doctorate from the London School of Economics, and an invitation from the Political Science Department to be a visiting professor. So, so that's for introductions. So I started teaching as a visiting professor at Concordia University in the Political Science Department in 1975, and got very quickly, just fresh out of my doctorate, and got very quickly involved in, how should I say, institution building for the coming century, both within my department and then with the so-called Fourth Division, which was created by Concordia in 1978, 79, and I was invited to participate in that exercise. So my home base has been with the Political Science Department, and I retired from took early retirement from Concordia in 1999, but I have been very active in research and teaching, and even taught a couple of courses in the School of Community and Public Affairs as late as 2013, 2014. I came back to teach a couple of courses. So that's roughly my academic background. My interest, very briefly, is about the relationship between capitalism and society, market and society. Why is it that there is this oscillation which Marx talks about? Karl Polanyi calls it the double movement between markets disembedding themselves from society and taking on a life of their own, dictating to society who should get what, when, and how, and then being pulled back in and brought under popular control. So that has been my lifetime curiosity. What are the forces that operate behind that, and how is that force field affected by changes in technology, especially communications? How language affects this movement, how we are swayed through language use, to be Trumpians or Harrisians, if we can use the current example, elections coming up in the United States in a couple of weeks. So basically, to put an end to my introduction, I'm, if I can say so humbly, a product of the so-called Budapest School of Political Economy, which dates back to the beginning of the 20th century, to the so-called linguistic turn introduced by Wittgenstein, amongst others, in Vienna, and the emergence of the revolution in the neurosciences, in cognitive sciences, which started looking at other things other than purely economic forces as agents of history, and looking at how other factors should be looked at if we want to find some explanations for human behavior and alter the human condition in a direction that will be less cataclysmic than it had been ever since the start of the agricultural revolution and the rise of empires. So that's my introduction. Okay, I hope that's enough.
That is incredible. You have such a complex background. It's very interesting.
Well, I'm glad
And
it's interesting to you.
I am shocked that, like, the way it all started, getting kicked out of Sir George William University.
Yes, that's a shocking start to the whole thing, and my return.
But a strong one at that.
It was quite a strong return.
And then
Yes.
you returned to Concordia and founded this.
Well, I returned, and I was hired on a tenure track position. First, I came to Concordia at the invitation of Concordia, which was by then amalgamated between Sir George Williams, the institution that kicked me out because they didn't like me and I wasn't performing up to standards for reasons we don't need to get into now. But Sir George Williams and Loyola were the founding institutions of Concordia University. Once they merged, and after I finished my doctoral studies at the London School of Economics, Concordia invited me. I worked for a year at Carleton University, and then Concordia University invited me into the political science department as a visiting prof, which then developed into an application for a tenure track opening, which came up, and I was hired on a tenure track position in 1977, and I got down to work. These were very exciting times. We should get to the history of the school imminently, but these were exciting times. Concordia was a new institution, and there was rebellion in the air. 1976, of course, in Quebec was a momentous occasion. This was the start of the so-called neo-conservative, neoliberal counter-revolution, the emergence of Thatcherism, Reaganism, and a rising restlessness amongst the university students, with whom I identified greatly, since I've only been one relatively recently, albeit a doctorate student, students were dissatisfied with the oftentimes useless preparation they received for entering society and engaging in meaningful relationship with their environment. I was very critical as a young scholar when I was hired. I had to mute my voice because if I became vocally critical, I would be fired and not given tenure, so I had to be a little bit cautious. But I became engaged in trying to modernize the institution which hired me, and put together a proposal for the political science department for its first graduate program, the master's degree in public policy and administration. That was entirely my creation.
That is so impressive.
Which to this day the institution is very proud of. It wasn't without controversy because there was a parallel competing proposal from other colleagues in the political science department who wanted to have a political philosophy graduate degree, and I argued that for heaven's sakes, we're in 1977-78, Anglophones are not being hired in the Quebec civil service or public service. Our students are ill-prepared to participate in the momentous decisions in this province and in this country about who gets what, when, and how, and why. Let's have a public policy, public administration graduate program and prepare students for the real world. And my colleagues accepted my proposal, but they didn't want to dismiss the proposal from the philosophers. So both of these proposals went forward to the faculty council and the Senate. Eventually my proposal won. The philosophy proposal lost out for obvious reasons. Concordia rightly recognized that the times are changing, as Bob Dylan would say. And the Quebec government also recognized that this is an interesting initiative. I went up to Quebec City with the chairman of the department at that time in political science and negotiated a deal with the Quebec government, and we got funding. Concordia got funding for that proposal, which, as I said, the first draft of it was handwritten, and somewhere in the department archives it still exists. And that's how I started out. But then, after that initiative got off the ground, there was another opportunity. Concordia University decided wisely to introduce, and largely in response to student demands, to introduce small colleges where students would have opportunities for a more intimate, more involved relationship with their professors in problem solving, learning, engaging in societal development. And the head of that initiative was a man called Robert Wall. I think he was the vice rector or vice chancellor or something. And so out of that Concordia-wide initiative came an idea for a school of community and public affairs. But nobody knew what that should look like. And so Robert Wall, the vice chancellor, asked my colleague in the political science department, Blair Williams, to be the first principal. And Blair Williams was a fine, upstanding scholar, a recognized member of the liberal establishment. He was president of the Canadian Federal Liberal Party at some point. But he wasn't really, Blair wasn't that well versed in academic, the intricacies and the bureaucracy and the pathways of academic curriculum development and so on. So he asked me to be his vice principal and to take charge of the development of the concept of the school. So I was tasked in 1979 through Bob Wall, through the principal Blair Williams, as vice principal, to head up the team that's going to design the SCPA. So that's what I did. We had a little committee that I headed. I think Cameron Nish from the history department was on it, and Blair, a guy from the French department, Albert Jordan, maybe somebody from the economics department, Morty Stelzner perhaps. But I was the conductor. Now we were we could talk until midnight about all this, and I have to be cognizant that we have a limited time. You see, the school began very much in response to student unrest and a recognition by a few people within the administration that there has to be some new initiatives, new way of dealing with how education confronts social change. But the ideas were not very clear in people's minds, and so it was top down in the sense that the guy on the top selected the guy below him, selected the guy below him. So Dr. Wall, Blair Williams, me as vice principal. And then I, along with Blair Williams, selected who we thought would be good people to be on these committees and the designing committee. So we looked for people who were progressive, who were liberal-minded, and who could be counted on to swim well and work well and congenially in an interdisciplinary little pond. So that's how we selected the people. Hubert Gendron was involved in this, and my great and good late friend Gail Valaskakis, who then at some point became the dean here at Concordia University. She played a prominent role, and I remember her very fondly. She was a very, very good colleague. And we put together a curriculum that and basically the design of the school. I was involved from the ground up, selecting armchairs, some of which are still in the school building to this day, the furniture, the carpeting, the waste paper baskets, the curriculum, the mission of the school, the design. Blair selected the design of the first cover for the school. But in terms of the mission statement and the curriculum and the purpose, that was more or less under my leadership, with contribution to others. The process was not without friction, because I was just a little upstart, a non-tenured faculty member, and all of the other people around me, Blair was also non-tenured, but all of the other people on our committees were tenured people, and there were a few elderly colleagues who looked at this as a career opportunity for themselves, and were not very keen on seeing an upstart like me, young, fresh out of graduate school, driving the train, if you will, shall we say the design team. So there was some friction, because there were other conceptions, but thankfully the conception that I was pushing was the winning one, and that conception was based on the recognition that our societies were becoming increasingly paralytic. There was increasing interdependence between institutions, business, government, labor, pressure groups, everybody getting into each other's kitchen, getting into each other's, how should I say, wheelhouse, and preventing anybody from steering their craft autonomously. Business was complaining about how much government was interfering, labor was complaining about how much government was interfering on its work. And so my logic was that we need to prepare students who are interdisciplinary, understand economics, sociology, technology, history, and can communicate in an interdependent fashion with their opposites. We need to stop shouting at each other, stop shutting each other down, and engage in what Jürgen Habermas, the sociologist that you may have heard of, called communicative action. Communicative action, on which volumes were written, but can be summarized in one sentence. Action driven by the desire to understand and to be understood. And that was the concept that I had for the School of Community and Public Affairs, based on communicative action for the coming century. And there was no curriculum at the time, anywhere. And so part of my job as vice principal of the School of Community and Public Affairs was to raise funds for a study that I would lead to look around Canada, United States, speak with government officials, union leaders, scientists, others, and develop the field of what I called public affairs management, or what was being called public affairs management at the time, because that's what we wanted to achieve, a curriculum to manage the interdependence between organizations in an increasingly interdependent world, so that interdependence wouldn't paralyze us, but liberate us. Okay? So I went on the road during my first year of the operation of the school in 1980 to do this research project, supported by our board. We had a board of advisors by then, one of whose members was Patrick Kenneth, who then became director of the university. Went on the road, did the research, wrote the book, and published it in a year and a half, which is a pretty rapid output. And it was hailed by not only some of the leading academics in the United States, but some of the top business leaders and union leaders in Canada. On the back of the book, there is lots of laudations about the pioneering nature of this. This book the book is called Social Change and Corporate Strategy, and the book was published in 1982, and by 1983 I was out of the School of Community and Public Affairs as a consequence of interpersonal rivalries, not as a consequence of the book or the work that I've done, but as a consequence of academic politics. And there ended my relationship with the institution that I founded. I was nearly fired from Concordia after that, a year later, not on any performance grounds, because I outperformed my fellow colleagues, but because I didn't obey the autocracy that ran Concordia at that point in time, namely the dean at the time, June Jacobson, Dean of Arts and Sciences, and the new division head of this fourth division, a man called Martin Singer. They decided they had different plans for me. They had different plans for the school, and I was up for tenure in 1983, and my dean told me privately that if you disobey me and run for the principalship, because meanwhile the principal, Blair Williams, resigned after the first year of operations, because Blair is a great man, he's a great friend to this day to me, but he found the school a little bit, how should I say, anarchistic to his likings. And the school was designed with anarchism in mind by me. I believe, and I consider myself a disciple of Kropotkin, that there's equality between students and faculty, and that is how we set up. That was how the school was set up, and Blair had a little trouble working with that model. So did a few other people. So this was not an authoritarian institution. Blair resigned, and obviously as vice principal, I thought I was entitled to run for the open chair. The chair became vacant, and the dean forbade me to run for the principalship. She called me to her office and said, Andrew, you go back into your department, be a department person, cut out this interdisciplinary nonsense, and wait until you get tenure before you start jumping around effectively. And I said, you're interfering, madam, in my academic freedom. I'm fulfilling all of my responsibilities towards my department. I get very high course evaluations, my research output is second to none. I'm fulfilling my roles. If there's any fault, please let me know. But I'm living with my academic freedom, and I'd like to apply for this position as principal of the institution that, after all, I was the designer of. She said, well, wait till you see what happens when you come up for tenure. And when I came up for tenure, my department supported me 100%, full unanimous vote in her committee, unanimous vote against. She stacked the committee, and I was denied tenure. And I was facing the same situation I faced as a 20-year-old when I was told to get the hell out of this institution that I came to as a young man. I was told to get the hell out as an adult, and having served this institution by designing two institutions that the university is proud of to this very day. So this was a traumatic moment for me. Obviously, if you're denied tenure, you're more or less, your academic career is finished. And I was only saved, and the reason why I was able to remain at Concordia and retire gracefully and with honor is that the rector of this university had sufficient backbone to step in and stop the injustice that was committed against me. So the rector stepped in and said to the dean and the provost and all of the people who were out to get me because of not any fault, but because of the good service, that all of the evidence against me must be thrown out. I can renew my application, and I was then given tenure, and my security at Concordia was secure. But from that point on, I wasn't involved with the School of Community and Public Affairs anymore. I was persona non grata in the institutions that both of you have loved, have had such good time in, and I'm so happy that you are, because I had a little bit to do with it, but I didn't have anything to do with the school after 1983, other than coming back in 2014 to teach a couple of courses, based largely on that book that I wrote, based on the research in 1981 at the start of the school. All right, so this is a long wind up, okay?
Incredible.
That is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
Wow.
I know a lot about the foundation of the school, but I know very little about its conduct, because for a while, even though some of my good friends were initially running it, they didn't want to end up in the same situation as me, so they kept me at arm's length. There's no need to mention names here. What I would have to say belongs into my autobiography, not into this interview. But after being told to get out of the school, I spent my time in the political science department and traveling the world. And then eventually I went to Eastern Europe for 20 years, to Hungary, in order to try out in that country the ideas that I developed on the basis that served the basis for the school's design. So I worked for 20 years in Hungary trying to develop this kind of communicative action between business, government, labor, community organizations, to create a democratic governance that would serve the people rather than serve the elites. And I ran into the same problem in Hungary as I did at Concordia. And I wasn't kicked out of Hungary. I had to escape from Hungary in 2010 because the then elected prime minister became very angry with me for suggesting the kind of approach that I suggested for Concordia University with the School of Community and Public Affairs in terms of how to educate and manage the interface between business and society and markets. To this day, I haven't been back to Hungary because it would be dangerous for me. Thankfully, I can go back into the School of Community and Public Affairs because especially Perry Kalsey likes me because he was one of my first students. He was in the first year of the operation of the school, or second year, I apologize. And Danielle Saleh, who was a principal of the school for many years and a colleague of mine in the political science department, he's also a good and close friend. And the school is no longer forbidden territory for me.
I am curious if you would care to share more on your vision for what the school could have been that maybe it seems like the other university members were maybe threatened by, or it seems like you were saying that students and teachers, there was an equality there that maybe disrupted some of the status quo.
Yeah. Well, one of the obvious tension was that we were engaged in institutional innovation. So interdisciplinary studies 50 years ago, half a century ago, was a danger zone. There were all kinds of vested interests in universities at that time. Today it's common course, but in those days it was a danger zone, and anybody who moved in there faced counteraction. Newton's fourth law: for every reaction there's an equal and and opposite reaction. So there was a reaction against that innovation that was institutional. Interests were being threatened. June Jacobson's interests were being threatened. Martin Singer's interests were being threatened by some of the things that we were doing. And then there were personal rivalries. There are always personal rivalries. Academic politics is notorious because the stakes are so small. I wrote a piece at that time. The world was going through a major shift in the late 70s and early 80s, and we as academics, I thought we're doing nothing but counting the cats in Zanzibar, and I wrote a piece with that title about how we're working ourselves into irrelevance, especially in the eyes of our students who can't get employment. Once they get out of the university, they have to be re-educated wherever they go, whether it's into a union, whether it's into a government department. They're inept. And basically they're inept because their professors are inept. The professors themselves don't speak the language of the real world. They speak the language of academia. They work on manufacturing expressions or phrases that no one can understand. This was proven scientifically by some excellent field research in physics of all places, where let's not get into it, we're going off the track. To answer your question, Rose, the School of Community and Public Affairs threatened the structures of this university initially, and some individuals specifically, and I irritated certain individuals who were authoritarian characters, such as June Jacobson was, who never published anything of noteworthy in her life, nor did the provo. I can't think of anything. I looked at what they published in comparison to what I published at the time as an untenured faculty, and I didn't find anything anything to note. I was an irritant to them because I was disobedient. I didn't bow and scrape, and stood up for my ideas, and I was unafraid. So they tried to scare me, and I didn't bend. And fortunately, it was reckless of me. I had already a small family, young children, 2-3 years old, two of them, 2 little boys, and if I was out in the street, I would have had help to pay for. It was very stressful for me personally this time, but I had one man in the name of Professor O'Brien, the rector, who stepped in, and things sometimes break or fall on the intervention of one person, and that person, who I didn't know from a hole in the ground, other than that he's the rector. I never met him, I never spoke to him. I didn't send him messages, come help me. He looked at the files, he looked at the documents, and he recognized that this was a kangaroo court created for me because I'm a man who speaks his mind, and not because I'm a bad scholar or a bad teacher, but because I threatened the establishment. Okay.
Thank you.
I have to say that, first of all, your story is very impressive. Second of all, I have read parts of the book that you mentioned.
Oh, you
did?
Wrote,
which
you
I found very interesting. Yeah.
Hannah, wow.
As soon as you said it, I was shocked, which I find very interesting. But I want to go ahead and say that at least in my opinion, I feel like the School of Community and Public Affairs has kept, to a certain extent, that same energy, where we have the reputation of being the ones that are not always liked by the faculty, and we take pride in that, honestly.
Yes.
So I want to just say that I think that the vision you did have for it did stay to a little.
Yeah, it stuck. I think I agree with you, Hannah. And I want to say unequivocally that everything that I have said up to this point is not to disparage the school after my departure. and I want to again emphasize that I know very little about how the school evolved after my departure. I wasn't privy to the discussions and other than seeing signs of enthusiasm from students. For years, I've met graduates of the school who were as enthusiastic as the two of you are back, within a year of me being out of there, and I was very happy. So there's no bitterness in my recollection, and I'm very happy that the school has continued and continues to this very day to provide a good home, a good learning environment for students. And happy to know that the initial imperative, the initial impulse that we had stayed. And I know some of the people who are involved with the school very well, like Danielle, like Margie Mendel, like Perry, who are true to that vision, who stay true to that vision. They each of them, of course, do things maybe in a different, they emphasize a different slice of this pie, or some different ingredients on the pie. I might be partial to pepperoni and they might be partial to anchovy, but it's the same pie that we're talking about, okay? So I am very proud of what the school has done and where it has come in 45 years. And what it shows that that the idea has withstood the test of time, that we did the right thing. Now, that the kind of curriculum design that I had in mind with that book, Social Change and Corporate Strategy, has not played such a significant element in the stream of consciousness in that enterprise, I could really care less. People create their environments out of their own free will and free efforts. And the school has created an environment that is meaningful and special and results-oriented for its students and for its faculty, and I applaud them. I'm not, I'm here to praise the school rather than to denigrate it. So I want to be very, very sure of that. Just because I had a rocky, I had a very rocky start. The only reason why I told this story is to answer the question that would come to anybody's mind. How come the person who was at the launch, at the genesis, disappeared off the map after the first couple of years? It's the same question one poses about what happened to Trotsky after the Bolshevik Revolution. There's Trotsky in 2020 in St. Petersburg, standing next to Lenin at the start of the Second International, the Second Congress of the Third International. Sorry about these numbers. and after Stalin comes to power, he's erased from the history books. So I was also erased from the history books, but Trotsky never denied the significance and relevance of the Russian Revolution, and I do not denigrate or deny the importance of the rise of the School of Community and Public Affairs.
It strikes me that you put a lot on the line for the vision you had for what could be possible.
Yeah. I put a lot. Let's put it this way. I put a lot into it, but at that time, when you're 50 years younger than I am now, you have a lot of energy, and especially if you love what you're doing. And I was very, very enthusiastic about what I was doing. It was great fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. I was astonished when I was slapped down. That wasn't fun, but I got over it, and I ventured out in different tracks I never gave up my curiosity about this double movement between market and society, this movement back and forth, yin and yang dialectic. And I was able to pursue my interests for decades afterwards. To this very day, I'm very active. I'm writing, I'm speaking out publicly. I'm fortunately in possession of my faculties. So
it's honestly very impressive, and I think that it's very nice to hear. It's very, I guess it's clarifying to hear that the School of Community and Public Affairs was created from a place of like passion and determination, the sort of one that shall not be given up.
Yes.
So it's very, very interesting, and also just makes total sense that is where it came from. And absolutely, we did want to hear how it was created. So it's very important for this story of the history of the school that we know where it comes from. And I think that just the fact that you fought for this school in this way really gave it, let's say, a little bit of a push to be what it is until this day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's. I think Hannah, you put it very well. It was a process of passion that went into the creative exercise. All of us at that point were passionate about bringing something into the world. Each one of our own lives is the result of passion that our two parents engaged in a passionate act that resulted in us sitting around this table. Come to think of it, it's a nice analogy, and that's sort of like a natural law. Virtually all of the natural world, animate part of it at least, is the result of passionate encounters, and that's what the creative exercise was at that time. But when you engage in a passionate exercise, there's also sometimes bruises that happen, and conflicts and stresses and strains. But that's down the river, that's up for the parties that experience that to digest one way or the other. I've digested it. I've now regurgitated a little bit of that element to explain the mystery for you guys, but to also signal to current and future students of the school of how pleased I am that passion produced as splendid an institution as it has proven to be. And I am aware, even though I'm not privy to the internal deliberations of that institution, I am aware of how so many of its graduates ended up playing significant roles in public life, be it at a local level, provincial level, a national level, or even international level, as diplomats, as government officials. Glenn Murray, who was a first-year student and a good friend of mine at that time, we were all very friendly with our students. In those days, we were on first-name basis, and were engaged not only in friendly bantering, but in friendly discussions about curricula and how to improve things, how to make things better. Those of us who were the faculty members didn't look upon our students in an authoritarian way, but in a collaborative way. And there was no hierarchy. It was a flat organization. I mean, there were structures created by the administration that we had to observe. There had to be a principal and a vice principal and fellows. But amongst us and students amongst us, there was equality. We respected each other's opinions and didn't lord it over each other. And I trust that structure remains to this day. I'm assuming just by speaking to the two of you, and when I went back to the school in 2013, 2014 to teach, I did sense from the atmosphere in my classrooms with students that structure is still existed, and the school was a little how should I say, laboratory of participatory democracy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, on that subject, I wanted to know how come you ended up coming back to the school and teaching in that year? What initiated that?
Well, I'm not sure. One was one was I wanted to share a little bit of my experiences of the previous 20 years, and also wanted to refresh my memories about what's happening in public affairs management, and teaching was a good way of doing that. But to tell you the truth, I also had a financial incentive. I was, chose the path of frugality. Okay, in my life, I earned quite considerable amounts of money, but I gave my money away over time to foundations and charitable causes, and I preferred to live at the minimum life standard, at the poverty level. That's where I live to this very day, by choice. And I was scratching it a little bit. I was falling a little bit below, so I needed to also to augment my income a bit during those years. So there were some dirty material interests that drove me back into the place that I helped to create, and it was an enjoyable couple of years, although in some ways it was also very surprising how the world has changed. The academic environment has changed since the last time I was teaching at Concordia.
I'm curious how you make sense of the point in history we find ourselves in today, and how you might see the school as positioned to be, as you mentioned earlier, an agent of history, or I guess what kind of role do you see possible with an institution like the SCPA?
Well, I have to be careful how I respond, Rose, because I'm not that familiar with the program elements now at the school, but I am familiar that certain elements were retained, such as the internship. I think it's still present. Which I was the first internship director of the school, as not only as vice principal but internship director, and set up that system in 1980. I mean 1980. Where are we? And that internship is a very powerful and cognitive device, and I'm very pleased that your advisory board now consists of people who are not only prominent in the environment, but are also former graduates. It's a very good innovation. When we set up the first advisory group, these people were, they only heard of the school from hearsay, and were enthusiastic about joining the project that we were trying to create, and which was reflected in the book that I wrote, and all of our advisory board read the manuscript. Some of them were advisors to me on that. So to answer your question, I think what you need to do is to maintain the approach, but really make sure that your students are out in the so-called real world. They are engaged in the players who are pulling and pushing against each other, trying to be understood and to understand, engaged in the communicative action, which I spoke of earlier, that your students are plugged into that circuitry. And if you're plugged into that circuitry, and if your curricula, your teachers can accurately reflect in an interdisciplinary way the realities of that world in terms of scholarly material and encourage you to participate in society, to be active players, to engage in your communities at whatever level, whether it's the running of the school, this university, or the running of the school, the running of the municipal or organizations or what have you, then there's going to be relevance. It's relevance. It's relevant to the here and now, and cognizance of the interdependent nature of our world. That our world is not a bunch of little islands disconnected from each other, but an interdependent, tightly knit fiber. Einstein and Heisenberg, the physicists, had great ideas on this, that we're all connected, and we need to understand how those connections work. It's very important to figure out how the connections work so that we pull together to produce better resolutions than to produce resolutions that are going to sink the good ship lollipop, as the saying goes. Because right now, things are pulling apart. I mean, as you just take a good look at what's happening in the United States. You have completely alternate visions of what should be done, and a billionaire, how should I say, congenital liar has managed to line up behind him 80% of America's working class, which is phenomenal. One should be frightened out of one's mind to recognize that this is possible. And the way he had done that is by use of language. Donald Trump's language use, which is highly scientific, and we can't get into the discussion of that right now, but it is not impromptu, it's not jazz, it's not, what's the word in jazz? It's not improvisation. There's a science behind it, and if either of you are interested in it, you can read a 2-volume book which was published in 1975, The Structure of Magic, that will explain it to you. He has found access to those two works and learned the tricks of how to get people to do backflips by just snapping your finger like that. It's language use. Habermas talks about this. A lot of other people talk about this. Something that the School of Community and Public Affairs might take a look at and reveal to students is, for example, language use under the label of neuro-linguistic programming, because that's what Donald Trump uses. Neuro-linguistic programming, which helps you to get what you want out of people, out of millions, hundreds of millions, if need be, even though it might be fully against their interests. You know, I mean, the reason why there's no money in the United States for welfare, for healthcare, for education, for the elderly, for the poor, for the marginalized, there's no money, is because Donald Trump, with the support of those people, has given most of the money away to his billionaire friends. He introduced the biggest tax cuts to the people who least need it, the 1%, and emptied the treasury so that there's nothing left over to anybody. So the American school system, the health system, everything is floundering, and people are upset with government, with Joe Biden and the Democrats, and they are unable to recognize that it's Donald Trump who's waving this stick by fooling them through language use. He calls himself a wealth creator.
Absolutely.
Anyways,
I mean, that's
we're veering off the topic.
But I mean, it's all very interesting.
Yeah.
We love this kind of stuff. So, as for the school itself, I think that what I would just like to know, and I think that you've told us actually a lot, and you honestly explained everything without me even having to answer questions, which is my favorite kind of interview, to be honest, because you really said it like a story. But I do want to know about your experience of teaching those students those years, and whether those students to you seem to have the kind of values that you had hoped for in the beginning.
Well, I had, let's put it this way, I had a checkered experience. One, no student is alike, okay? So you have you have some favorite students, you have some students who catch on, and then you have, I mean, I've been a student, I know how it is. I mean, you have classmates who pay attention, who are enthusiastic, who understand, participate, and then you have some who want the easiest way out. And that's the way it goes. So every class is different, every year is different. The first year that I taught at the SCPA I thought was very good. The students were very keen. They seemed very keen on learning these skills that I was bringing into the classroom, with which they were not familiar with. And they came out of my practice, because I mean, one of the things that I did after I retired from Concordia is that I ran consultancies, both in a profitable and a non-profitable way, behind enemy lines in Hungary. And enemy lines, I mean capitalism, is also for me trying to veer things in that direction. So the first year students, I think that was 2013, were very good and very excited, and things went very well. I was a little bit rusty because I was out of the classroom, and things were happening in my own life that were somewhat how should I say, distractive. Let's put it that way, and not get into the details. But that was a good year. The second year also started off very well, but ended up in a little off base, I suppose. Very good students again. I was always struck both years about the quality of the students. Very good. They were very engaged in discussions and good critical responses, and with very few exceptions, willing to do the work. One of the things that struck me when I came back to the classroom was that the tolerance of stress by students, the tolerance of workload by students, was far less in 2013 than when I was when I was first at Concordia. I mean, for us it was normal to have to read 100 pages for one professor a week. By 2013 you could do that. You'd have a revolt on your hands, and student power went to the extent that if you did more, if you applied a little bit more stress, you'd hear from your chairman, what did you do, and blah blah blah. There's a new relationship now between students and academic institutions, brought on by economic necessities. Administrations look upon students as clients. They're paying clients, and they have to be treated as such. And if the client is unhappy, the university is not going to do well, and so you have to toe the line. So I was a little bit surprised of this clientist bent on the part of some of my students. And to summarize, every year, and this is what I have done during my 30-40 years of teaching, I hand out a course outline. You all know professors hand out course outlines, and they say there's going to be a midterm test, there's going to be this requirement, course requirements, how many essays, or whatever. So on my course requirement for that year, there was a final exam, a written final exam, everything we discussed at the beginning of the course. And I am very cognizant of students' worries about preparing for exams. So what I always do is I prepare a study guide in my courses. I put together 60 or so questions, of which I'm going to say 6 questions will be definitely on the final exam. Study these questions. If you study these questions, answers, prepare yourself, and I give out these questions at least a month in advance. You are going to be really well prepared. So I really prepare my students. I don't want them to be blindsided. So the questions that are on the final exam, they will have come across in a study guide. So my students in the second year at the School of Community and Public Affairs panicked 3 weeks before the final exam. I guess they were full of stress. I would have been stressful too. And came to me and said, could we do a take-home exam instead? And I said, listen, we agreed on this. We had a contract. You all accepted. These were the conditions. I can't change the requirements. At the end of the course, there's going to be a final exam, and I have to insist on doing this. And they reported me to the principal of the school, and became rebellious. Not badly, but enough to make me feel a little bit unhappy about that kind of behavior. But I stuck to my guns, and there was a lot of pressure, and I was told that, well, why don't I take everybody out to a pub and have a drink with my students? And I said, that's not the kind of professor I am. We are all adults. I consider my students to be adults. We had an agreement, and we stick to that agreement. So the final exam was held, and I didn't bend, but that wasn't a good experience for me, and it wasn't a good experience for some of my students of 214, and I didn't come back for 215. I did not want to face a similar experience, but by and large, I had a very good experience with the students of the school. I marveled at their how should I say, innovativeness and participatory zeal, and I chalk up this little last hiccup in 214 to stress on their part, because they were worried. I mean, grades are so important now in the life of a student. You come to blows over a B plus or a B. I pity my colleagues who face that now from the student body, because everybody's looking for GPA averages so that they can get into graduate school, so they can get a PhD, and so they can find themselves unemployed afterwards. I know how it goes.
It's very true, but definitely I can see that happening in the SCPA. I don't think we have any take-home exams, but in-person exams. It's a very special part of the SCPA, because in the political science department we have in-person exams.
Yeah.
So it's two different worlds. Yeah. Honestly, I think that I have all the information that I need and that I wanted to have. Do you have any last questions?
No last questions. My only comment that I thought you might find interesting is just that now Concordia really prides itself on its interdisciplinary
indeed
study.
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
it's also cool to see that the
Indeed.
SCPA
at some point it was unaccepted.
Yeah.
At some point it was unaccepted, and at some point it was threatening to people.
Absolutely.
Because let's put it this way: it's very hard to land an academic position. You need to be cognizant of the economics and existential circumstances that you are in. One of my middle son has a PhD from McGill, and he can't get an academic job for the life of him. We're generating doctorates by the hundreds, by the thousands, and maybe 2 or 3 or a handful will find a job, and that should be at some point addressed as well. Why are we doing this? And we're doing it because of momentum, because that's the only way we can, keep the institution alive.
Absolutely.
But what you said, Rose, is very true. Interdisciplinarity is not only vital to the survival of the planet in terms of knowledge to manage. But is important at the university, and the universities are doing a lot of things right. They're also doing some things wrong, and there's this struggle between right and wrong. I don't mean in a political sense, left and right, but doing things right the right way and doing things the wrong way. And momentum is pushing it or pulling, depending on where you're coming from or where you're at.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think that this has been very enlightening, and it's very interesting to hear not just the roots of the school, but all of these different opinions about academia, and not opinions, but these different facts about academia.
Yes.
And it's very interesting because it's not something that we usually talk about. It's always
we don't
get your
talk.
master's degree, get your PhD, get good grades, and then what? But that was everything I honestly wanted to know. If you want to leave us with any last messages, we would be happy to listen.
Well, the last message I would love to leave with you and with those who are responsible for this project, which I think is a very important project, and I congratulate remotely Anna Sheftel, who I think is the originator of this. But this is a great initiative, and I wish her success. I've only met her once briefly on the street. We haven't had a face-to-face conversation, but I wish my best to the successful completion of this project, and I wish to celebrate the school's 45th anniversary. I'm very happy that it has come this far. I don't know if there's going to be some kind of a celebration or not, but I hope to be able to attend.
Absolutely.
If invited, I will be very happy to do so.
First created 45 years ago in 1980, SCPA is a school within Concordia University, offering a unique learning experience meant for those who are interested in community, society, and policy. Our programs are based in community engagement and experiential learning and have led to precious friendships, dedication, and passion.
Over the past few months, we have been interviewing alumni, past principals, and anyone who had an impact on the school or who has been impacted by the school. These interviews were done in hopes of hearing these memories straight from the people who lived them.
Thank you for joining us. We hope these videos show you how unique and exceptional a place SCPA is.